David has worked around the world. All of the powerful personalities that David has had to wrestle with through his career. And there's clearly something about the challenges of the IT's perspective, because both Julia and David have thought, oh my God, I've got to write a book about this.
At the moment, I've got four different clients and across multiple industries. And I actually start with actually understanding their business. And the first piece of my engagement will actually be more open-ended questions and getting their take on their business and what they're worried about. And that will be much broader than technology, much, much broader. And the reports I produce, the interest from the executive group is actually less about the technology solution, it's more about the dynamic within their business. Okay. And I start at that place. And I always want to understand what direction is the business going in? Is it looking at being acquired? Is it a de-investment? Because that will make you think about some of your technology horizons. I don't even then go to technology. I then look at actually who are the players within this business? Where are the pockets of influence? Who's actually done stuff really, really well? And then starting to think about process and where can we actually generate value in that process. For example, I've got a client in the construction industry in doing a building. The margins are really thin and it's really risky. The money's made if you optimise the tendering process or after you actually deliver that building and manage the asset. That's where you can make the money, and actually understanding that within an enterprise, and then you actually line up the technology. But there's a raft of factors before we go there. And so many times I'll see the CIO leading with this technology strategy and a little bit inside me just dies. Just dies because you know where that conversation's going to go. Really great at making things complex. Yeah. And the CEO just wants their breadth of responsibilities now with regulatory pressures, emerging markets, globalization, a whole raft of issues. We need to simplify the complex, and that's where we need to start. And working with some of the organisations that I do, they're saying, can you come in and do a technology strategy? And I said, fundamentally, it's fundamentals first. Actually, what do you just need to get done? End-of-life issues. 50 to 60% of your time should be focused on that. How are you actually simplifying the business so the organisation could potentially reach its digital potential down the track? And what are we actually choosing to innovate within our business, which is probably about 10 to 20% of your effort. If you lead with innovation, you will not maintain credibility, and that will lead to frustration around some of the fundamentals and simplicity. And so that's where I start. Having been a CIO, having met many CIOs around the world, I think the key thing is you need to understand what sort of CIO are you. What is actually your reputation? Because there's sort of three types. There's a technology leader who actually loves cutting code, provisioning data centers and doing that stuff really, really well. If you're that person, really think about what investment you're making in your development. And guess what? It's not going to be learning more about technology. The next type is the peculiar type person who actually will go out and outsource the function, really, really good at getting some sort of third party to work to a box. The reality is you're going to have to work outside that box in the next horizon. And that is actually going to result in additional cost and some complexity. And then there's the business type of CIO, and we actually don't have enough of them. And where do you actually partner and who controls that relationship with your customer? And partnering is seen as a great way to get into a market. It is a great way to get in the market if you control the relationship with the customer. It's also a great way to erode your business really quickly if you don't. And organisations who are trying a digital leapfrog, as I call it, and they look at partnering as a solution, actually need to step back and look at the broader dynamics. And I just don't think we have enough technologists doing that, and that's why I have a job at the moment within some of these organisations. Really run the risk of being digitally dumb or digitally numb. And what I mean by being digitally dumb is actually taking an existing traditional process that is possibly eroding value in your business and digitising it and continuing with it. Technology's enabled a lot of people to do a lot of work that is probably not adding much value. And we need to shift that conversation to one that is actually adding value. And if you can't influence that executive, they are digitally numb, right? There's two different things. Digitally dumb, you do dumb stuff, you make it digital and you exacerbate the problem. And digitally numb is your lack of ability to actually influence that exec. And there's sort of 4 profiles of work. There's a sort of undertaking work that nobody knows anything that's happening. They really do. But when something goes wrong, I can't believe we're still doing that. Sure, they stood up a business case and it did and it got declined. And then there's sort of the work that's just accepted within an organisation by collective consensus that is actually holding you back. It's an anchor. And then you get the Gen Y population, the younger generation coming in, and they'll go off and they'll do some exploring and they'll do something. You've got multiple people in your organisations, mark my words, I meet them every day outside of IT who are looking at a cool app, segregating data somewhere, actually looking at designing something for somebody, but the collective thought is actually not happening, as in Chris's organisation, and those people need to be integrated back in. And that's where you can really make meaning. And that's the first section of my book. I don't talk about technology. You've got to get your head around the work and the value of the work. You think shadow apps have been a problem for your organisation? Wait till you get shadow IoT and everything that's associated with that. And the billions of connected devices, the data that it's generating, the software solutions that sit outside of that. That is a process that you actually need to understand, is how you onboard, secure, integrate that data. And in actual fact, you need to get in front of the curve. You don't want to be in that situation where you're actually sitting now and learning about these shadow apps that are actually outside your business, being provisioned by people within your business, and that actually aren't part of the broader architecture. You know how I spoke about that 10 to 15%, 20% of innovation? If you're in a business that has IoT potential, that's where you need to innovate. You need to start partnering with organisations that actually are providing these solutions and that may circumnavigate you and go to some C-levels within your organisation in order to address a problem or identify an area of potential.